Anyone going to listen to them? Good. Good. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Meghna Chalasani, and I'm from the Office of Strategic Programs within the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research here at FDA. My colleague Sarah asked me to start off with a little joke about the Beltway and traffic, but I don't drive. And most of you guys apparently didn't have a horrible commute, so you should give us FDA some tips because it's hard to get here in the morning every day. I will be co-facilitating the discussion today with my colleague Sarah Eggers. Today's meeting, conducted as part of the agency's Patient-Focused Drug Development Initiative, is focused on hearing from patients who have received an organ transplant. Later this afternoon, we will be having a more scientific discussion with patients, patient advocacy organizations, healthcare providers, academic experts, and industry on various aspects of clinical drug development intended for patients who have received organ transplants, including medication adherence and experience with intervention. Dr. Edward Cox will be providing some opening remarks in a few minutes. But first, let me start by asking my colleagues sitting here in the front to state their names and their role within the agency.
Good morning. I'm Ed Cox, Director of the Office of Antimicrobial Products within the Office of New Drugs and CDER, FDA.
Hello, my name is Renata Albrecht. I'm the Director of the Division of Transplant and Ophthalmology Products within the Office of Antimicrobial Products in OND, FDA.
Hello, good morning. My name is Özlem Belen. I'm a Deputy Director for Safety in the same review division as Dr. Albrecht.
Good morning. Ergun Velidedeoğlu, Medical Officer in the same division.
Good morning. I'm Mark Kavayakol, Medical Officer in the Division of Transplant and Ophthalmology Products at CDER. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Teresa Mullen. I direct the Office of Strategic Programs. And I'll say a little more later. Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Michelle Campbell. I'm a reviewer in the Clinical Outcome Assessment staff in the Office of New Drugs, CDER.
Good morning. I'm Pujita Vaidya from the Office of Strategic Programs.
And I'm Sarah Eggers from the Office of Strategic Programs.
And we also have Graham Thompson from our office, as well as Shannon Woodward, who are helping us today. Now to give you all a brief overview of the agenda. It's a busy one. We will first spend a bit of time providing background on our Patient-Focused Drug Development Initiative and on organ transplantation and available post-transplant treatment options. And then we'll hear how the information we learn at our PFDD meetings, like today's, is and can be used. Then we will move into our discussion with patients and patient representatives. Our two main topics are life after receiving an organ transplant and post-transplant treatment regimen. Sarah will be providing some more details about the format at the start of those discussions. We have time set aside later today for open public comment. While the primary discussion this morning is focused dialogue with patients and patient representatives, the open public comment will give anyone in the audience the opportunity to make a comment. To participate in that, you will need to sign up at the registration table. Participation is first come, first serve. We'll close that sign-up sheet later at the end of our first break, which is around 10:45. The time allowed for each speaker will depend on the number of participants who express interest, likely 1 to 2 minutes each. For a few logistical and housekeeping points, there is a kiosk right outside where you can get food and beverages. There is an option to pre-order lunch. Restrooms are located behind the kiosk. At any point, if you need to get up for any reason, please feel free to do so. As I mentioned, we will be taking a 15-minute break around 10:45. Lunch is from 12:30 to 1:15, and then we have another 15-minute break this afternoon around 2:50. I do want to ask at this time that you all silence your cell phones. This meeting is being transcribed and a live webcast is being recorded, both of which will be archived on our website. With that, I'd like to welcome Ed for opening remarks.
Great, thanks. Well, good morning and welcome everyone to this meeting on patient-focused drug development for patients who've received organ transplants. I've introduced myself, but I'm Ed Cox. I'm the director of the Office of Antimicrobial Products. And Renata and I work together. Our office reviews the drugs that prevent rejection in organ transplant recipients. I want to thank you all for joining us here today. We're happy to see so many folks here, patients, caregivers, and advocates in the audience. I understand we also have a number of people too on the web who will be joining in and listening into the meeting, so I think that's great. So there are a lot of folks in the room, but there's also a lot of folks out there on the web that are watching us too. And we appreciate your willingness to be part of the meeting and sharing your experiences with us. It really is what provides, in essence, the value to the meeting, so we're very grateful for that. We're excited for the opportunity to engage directly with you and to learn about the symptoms that matter most to you, the impact that organ transplantation has on your daily lives, and what factors you take into account when selecting a post-transplant regimen, and just quite simply the things that you like and that you don't like about your transplant medications. In our discussion today, we'll be focusing on various types of experiences that are present among organ transplant recipients, and we'll delve into changes in your post-transplantation therapy regimen and what aspects of your care have changed over time. Mark Kavaya-Cole from the Division of Special Transplant and Immunologic Products, or Ophthalmologic Products, will provide more background on organ transplantation, and will also talk about available treatment options in just a few minutes. And we understand that organ transplantation is a life-altering experience with physical, emotional, and social impacts, and that there's an unmet need for patients. It's FDA's responsibility to ensure that the benefits of a drug outweigh its risks. Therefore, having this kind of dialogue is extremely valuable for us, because hearing what patients care about can help us lead the way in figuring out how to best facilitate drug development post-organ transplantation and understand how patients view the benefits and risks of various drug products in this complex area. For example, what we hear today from you can help us understand how to develop better endpoints to measure the aspects of post-organ transplantation management that are important to patients. I know we also have representation from industry, academia, and other government partners in the room and on the web. And while FDA plays a critical role in drug development, we're just one part of the process, and I'm glad to see a high level of interest from folks from the various different parts that play a role in drug development. FDA protects and promotes public health by evaluating the safety and effectiveness of quality of new drugs, but important to keep in mind that we aren't the ones that actually do the clinical trials. The drug companies, typically working with patients and research, with the research community, are the ones who actually conduct the clinical trials and submit the applications for new drugs to FDA. It's then FDA's responsibility to evaluate this information and to evaluate whether the benefits of a drug outweigh its risk. The benefit-risk decision-making is an integral part of our review process, and we look forward to incorporating what we learn here today from the patient's perspective into thinking and how we evaluate our evaluation of benefit and risk as we look at treatments for managing organ transplantation. So once again, we're here today to hear the voice of the patient, so thank you for your participation. Thank you for joining us today. You're, in essence, what makes this meeting what it is, and I think that's great. We're grateful to each of you for being here and your willingness to share your experiences with us. It really helps us to understand and appreciate your perspective on these issues. And just so that folks know that this morning is really the patient-focused session. We also have a scientific session in the afternoon, and we welcome and would hope that many of you could stay so that we can also have the patient perspective as we move to talk about the scientific aspects in the afternoon. So with that, I'll turn the podium over to Teresa Mullen, who will provide some background on FDA's patient-focused drug development effort. So Teresa, the podium is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. So as Ed said, I'm going to take just a few minutes to tell you about this patient-focused drug development initiative. This is the context and the initiative that has been the vehicle for our scheduling and planning this meeting, and others that we've been done so far in the last few years, and we'll do a few more next year. And it got started, this idea of having a meeting focused on only hearing from patients and their caregivers, where there's caregivers that have input to give us as well. Back in 2010, when we were having discussions about this, we recognized that we had this benefit risk assessment framework that we were developing, but we realized that patients are really uniquely positioned to tell us about the benefits that would be most meaningful to them, and the things that would bother them, and really their perspective on their disease. And this was sort of missing as an overarching source of input for us, because we had only at that time the patient representative program, where you have an individual patient who would be asked to join discussions and maybe weigh in on what we call in the government a particular matter, which is to say about a particular drug and decision-making around that. And that, of course, means we also have to put that person through conflict of interest screening. And this tends to really narrow the possibilities and the timing and our flexibility in trying to get the input of the community. And so we didn't really have a mechanism at that time. We only were able to have one person help us think through the patient's perspective. Sometimes those people didn't have the disease that we were thinking about at that time either. And so this is a more systematic way to gather that information and get the patient's perspective, to have these meetings where we try to bring everyone that we can into the process. We work with advocacy groups and with the care provider community to try to help us let patients know about it. And I want to also welcome the people on the webcast. Thank you for joining us on the webcast as well. That's a key feature of these meetings, because it helps us to enable more people to participate in the process. And you'll see our facilitators bring them into the discussion as well. And so this helps us to really get that larger community involved. We made a commitment to do this as part of our reauthorization of the Prescription Drug User Fee Act in 2012. We said we would do at least 20 of these meetings, and guess what? This is the 20th meeting, but they're so popular among the review divisions that we actually have more coming next year. We're going to exceed that number, but this is what we've set up to systematically get this input. And at the time we made that commitment, we thought 20 sounded like a big number. But we were quickly told by a lot of patient groups that that was way too few meetings, and that they were concerned that we might not be able to get to their condition and their concerns. And so we went through a process where we asked the review divisions to help us identify what diseases they could think of and conditions where they would really like to, they think it would really help them in particular to hear more from the patient community. And that produced about 40 diseases that were like the top 40 in their minds, and we published that in the Federal Register to get comment. We got about 4,500 comments about that list. We had to then go back and do the very hard thing of trying to winnow it down to more like the 20 that we were going to be able to do. As a result, we're going to do 24, and we've come up with another mechanism called externally led meetings to try to help us to hear from other groups as well, because these meetings, patients have really enjoyed having the opportunity to speak at these meetings. They've been useful. So we have this other process as well. And here's just a quick overview of the diseases and the conditions that we have focused on in the past few years. And you can see where we are today. And there's quite a range. I mean, we wanted to find conditions that were chronic in general, had an important symptomatic or a loss of functioning that might be an effect on functioning that was important to patients, and affected a wide range of ages. And that's not a whole lot of challenge. Those criteria are met by many diseases, and you can see that range here. And here we are today with our meeting focused on patients who have had an organ transplant and what your experience is, including with the medications you take after the transplant. Now, each of these meetings is tailored to the condition that we're exploring and listening to and hearing from you all about. We do ask some standard questions that at the beginning of this process, a very diverse group of patients from different disease advocacy groups came to us to hear how we were going to run this process because they were very interested, and they actually helped us come up with what they thought were good basic questions that they thought resonated with all of them. And so we have some of those in the mix of what we will, our Meghna and Sarah will be asking and talking about today. And we've also tailored and brought in other questions that the review divisions have particular interest in and want to hear more about as well. And they will be asking you questions as they feel the need to in the course of the discussion. If they hear something that maybe we've heard sometimes that from the division that they hear things in these meetings that they've never heard before, that are not reported in the literature. It's a very unique opportunity for them to learn and in some ways almost start problem solving around things that they're hearing. So it's very exciting. And so we'll also talk about what topics are currently of concern. And we've learned, as I said, a great deal from the input of these meetings. One of the most concrete and near-term outputs of these meetings is what's called a Voice of the Patient report. We keep a docket open so that those on the webcast and those in the room and others can submit other information that you may have that you think is relevant to what you've heard today or you want us to know. And so we leave that open for a little while after the meeting so people have time to submit information that they might want us to know about. And after that's closed, we analyze very carefully what comes in that docket. As you heard, we are doing a transcript of this meeting. We analyze the transcript to try to really capture what's been said, and we try to make these documents one that reflect very faithfully what we hear from you in the words of the patients as they are conveyed to us. So we think this has been a useful reference tool for us. We also have heard from patients who've been in these meetings and felt the reports were very useful to them as well. So that's just the first step, and we're really building on what we've learned here in our next 5-year plans for trying to further sort of capture the information from patients more systematically as well in clinical trials and in other ways to build it even more into our decision making. So with that, I think that's my last slide. Yes, I'll turn it over to Mark. Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to present to you an overview of organ transplantation and available post-transplant treatment options in the United States. Organ donation and transplantation to treat end-stage organ disease is life-saving, transformative, and restorative for patients with a serious condition. The number of donated organs or donors recovered, represented in blue below, and the number of transplanted patients annually, represented in green, has not kept up with the increasing number of patients on the waiting list, represented in yellow. Organ allocation in the United States. The National Organ Transplantation Act of 1984 established the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network, which maintains the organ registry and ensures equitable allocation of organs in the United States. Regional organ procurement organizations identify suitable donors and collect donated organs. The United Network of Organ Sharing operates the OPTN and allocates the organs from the OPOs. The Scientific Registry of Transplant Recipients, also created by NOTA, conducts ongoing evaluation of the clinical and scientific status of transplantation in the United States. Much of the data that will be presented here comes from their annual reports. The types of organs transplanted annually in the United States include kidney, liver, pancreas, and intestine, as well as heart, lung, and heart-lung. The majority of the organs are recovered from deceased donors, but with a substantial contribution of living donors in kidney and to a lesser extent in liver transplantation. Here are presented the number of patients active on the waiting list on the left and total transplants on the right for the decade of 2004 to 2014. Approximately 17,000 kidney transplants are performed per year, with an increasing number of patients on the waiting list at in excess of 60,000. About 7,000 liver transplants are performed, and about 2,600 heart transplants are performed. Only in lung transplantation has the number of transplantation increased and the number of patients on the waiting list decreased. Polypharmacy is the rule in solid organ transplantation, with all the challenges of managing drug-drug interactions and complex daily regimens. There are medications to prevent and treat rejection include induction immunosuppression with intensive combination regimens, maintenance immunosuppression with less intensive combination regimens, and additional medications for treatment of acute rejection. Thus, the need for medications to prevent and treat viral, bacterial, fungal, and other opportunistic infections. As well, there's also the need for medications for treating the existing or pre-existing underlying medical conditions such as hypertension, diabetes, and hepatitis C that led to the organ failure. And there also need for medications to treat the emerging complications of the immunosuppressive regimens, including hypertension and new onset diabetes. Let's look at some of the treatment options for immunosuppression use in transplantation. There are agents used for induction treatment, lymphocyte depleting agents, polyclonal IgG antibodies derived from horse or rabbit, interleukin-2 receptor antagonists, monoclonal antibodies modified to be humanized or chimeric, that bind to the alpha chain of interleukin-2 receptors and inhibit cell proliferation. There's high dose of other agents used in maintenance also round out the induction immunosuppression. Maintenance immunosuppression usually uses a combination of 2 to 3 agents below. Glucocorticosteroids are used for both induction and maintenance immunosuppression, as well as the treatment of rejection. Calcineurin inhibitors, namely cyclosporin and tacrolimus, are the agents around which additional agents are added to complete the immunosuppressive regimen. Purine antagonists include azathioprine, mycophenolate mofetil that inhibit cell proliferation. The inhibitors of the mammalian target of rapamycin modulate mTOR and also impair cell proliferation. And there is at least one co-stimulator blockade that blocks CD28 co-stimulation of T lymphocytes. Here are represented the immunosuppression used in adult kidney transplant recipients per year from the SRTR. The majority of kidney transplantations receive a regimen of tacrolimus and mycophenolate. And about 2/3 are receiving steroids at transplantation, 1 year post-transplantation. The vast majority receive some form of induction agents, 2/3 receiving T-cell depleting agents, and about 1/4 receiving interleukin-2 receptor antagonists. In liver transplantation, similarly to kidney transplantation, the majority receive tacrolimus and mycophenolate. 80% receive steroids at transplantation, and still 40% are receiving steroids at 1 year post-transplant. There's an increasing use of induction agents in liver transplantation as more patients come to liver transplantation with impaired renal function. Similarly, in heart transplantation, tacrolimus and mycophenolate is the regimen used in the majority of the patients. The majority are receiving corticosteroids. About 50% are receiving induction immunosuppression. Let's take a look at some of the outcomes. Again, 5-year graft survival in kidney transplantation is about 74% of deceased donor recipients and 86% for living donors. In liver transplantation, 5-year overall graft survival is about 70%, and there are now more than 72,000 liver transplant recipients that are alive with a functioning graft, with many more pediatric recipients reaching adulthood every year. In heart transplantation, 5-year graft survival is about 76%, and there are more than 28,000 heart transplant recipients surviving with a functioning graft. Most of them had undergone transplantation after the age of 50. There are about 2,000 lung transplants performed in 2014, and the 5-year survival is about 55% in that population. Graft survival in intestine transplantation has improved over the past decade, and the number of patients with functioning intestinal grafts has steadily increased from 2003 to more than 1,000 in 2014. 42% are pediatric intestinal liver transplant recipients. The number of pancreas transplants has declined since 2004. Future challenges. New approaches are needed to increase organ donation, procurement, and decrease discard of procured organs, to prevent, treat delayed graft function, to prevent or treat antibody-mediated rejection, to individualize treatment using biomarkers, genomics, and systems biology, to induce durable and stable immune tolerance, still the holy grail, to minimize adverse reactions associated with immunosuppressive regimens, and to integrate the use of novel concomitant agents and manage drug-drug interactions. And above all, the risk-benefit of new and old approaches and interventions need to be assessed from a patient's perspective. Thank you for your attention. And now I'll turn the podium over to Michelle Campbell.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Campbell, and I'm with the Clinical Outcome Assessment staff. The Clinical Outcome Assessment staff advises the clinical review divisions in the Office of New Drugs upon request regarding clinical outcome assessments, which include physician or clinician-reported outcomes, and most importantly, patient questionnaires that are commonly referred to as patient-reported outcomes. Review these questionnaires to ensure that they are measuring the most important and bothersome symptoms and impacts to patients, and that they are measuring these concepts in an accurate and reliable measure. Today, I'll briefly present on how we utilize information from the patient-focused drug development program and meetings, and how we aim to incorporate patient input into clinical study endpoints. You may be wondering, how is this information we use in the PFDD meetings? And what do we do what we hear from our patients? We have these meetings, but where do we go from here? How do we take this valuable information and generate clinically relevant patient-focused endpoints to a place in clinical studies? So I hope the next few slides I can answer some of these questions for you. One of the main advantages to having these PFDD meetings is that it gives all stakeholders the opportunity to listen to the patient voice. We find it very useful to hear the patient experience, particularly to hear what is important from their perspective and how you describe your symptoms and impacts in your own words. We hope it helps give drug sponsors ideas about what are important symptoms and impacts to measure in clinical studies, and later make the investment to develop or select questionnaires to measure these important concepts, as well as engage in future FDA discussion. The information from these meetings also helps inform how we at the FDA review patient questionnaires and drug applications to see if they adequately are assessing the patient's perspective of their medical condition. While the PFDD meetings provide initial input, we also strongly recommend that drug sponsors or other research who are developing these questionnaires engage with additional patients who are developing or to using qualitative research, either through focus group interviews or one-on-one interview interactions, as well as gather input from other experts such as physicians or caregivers. The goal of this is to confirm that the questionnaires include important yet relevant information to ensure that the questions and instructions in these questionnaires are clear and understandable to patients. Another advantage of these meetings is that it helps us to think about clinical study endpoints. So what is an endpoint? In the case of a patient questionnaire, the study endpoint would be how the questionnaire score is going to be measured and analyzed in a clinical study. For example, if patients are reporting that the most important treatment benefit to them is symptom improvement, then we would encourage that the drug sponsor to develop or select a symptom questionnaire using good measurement principles and meeting regulatory standards. The study endpoint could possibly be changed in the questionnaire score during the clinical study, which would measure the amount of symptom improvement. One key consideration is that there are many things that are important to patients that are discussed during PFDD meetings, and or in patient focus groups or interviews. However, not all of these things lend themselves to be measured in clinical studies for drug approval, as they may not be impacted by treatment, making it difficult to interpret its results. Here at the FDA, we focus on efficacy and safety. So, for example, financial well-being may be an important concept for patients, but may be minimally or not at all impacted by treatment in a clinical study setting. So encouraging drug sponsors to consider selecting important concepts that can measure treatment effect as key study endpoints. Financial well-being and other important concepts that are unrelated to treatment can still be measured, but perhaps in exploratory purposes. For organ transplantation, study endpoints that include patient questionnaires will be helpful to provide additional supportive evidence of benefit. At the FDA, we have to uphold laws and regulations. Within these regulations, there are regulatory standards for assessments like patient questionnaires that require methods of assessments of subjects' responses to be called well-defined and reliable. Thus, when we describe these findings of these assessments in labeling, those statements are not potentially false or misleading. So not only do we recommend drug sponsors to engage with patients to develop questionnaires using qualitative research, we also recommend that they perform appropriate quantitative research or statistical testing to show that the questionnaire is well-defined and reliable. Both qualitative and quantitative research can tell us whether the patients can understand and respond as intended to these questionnaires. Additionally, these tests can provide an estimate of what a meaningful change or improvement is on the questionnaire. Patient involvement also is extremely important in determining how to interpret what a meaningful change or improvement is. We recommend that drug sponsors seek input from the FDA as early and often as possible in their drug development programs. In some cases, if a patient questionnaire does not exist, then existing questionnaires may be modified or a new one developed. It is important for drug sponsors to start the process of selecting or developing these questionnaires early and use them early and often in clinical development to gain experience with them before using them in a phase 3 clinical trial to confirm clinical benefit. So we have two pathways to provide advice to those interested in using patient questionnaires or patient-reported outcomes or other clinical outcome assessments in clinical trials. First is within the context of the individual drug development program. This is where we encourage drug sponsors to begin discussions as early as possible, preferably in the pre-IND stage, so that if any work is needed that needs to be done, we can go ahead and have those discussions early. The second pathway is outside of the individual drug development program. This is through our drug development tool or DDT qualification process. In this program, we can work with questionnaire developers, patient advocacy groups, sponsors, researchers to develop and qualify questionnaires for use across multiple drug development programs. We work with many stakeholders, including consortia, patient groups, individual academic investigators, and drug developers within this program. Once qualified, this tool becomes publicly available for use. So key takeaways is that our PFDD meetings are the starting point for developing patient-focused outcome measures and endpoints. The outcomes of these meetings will support and guide the FDA's risk-benefit assessment and drug reviews. And patients' input ultimately helps determine what is measured to provide the evidence for treatment benefit, how best to measure the concepts in a trial, and what is meaningful improvement. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Sarah so we begin our discussions.
Good morning, everyone. I hope that you gain an appreciation of the complicated things that FDA, our colleagues, have to think about every day when they come to work. And now it's time to turn it over and think about and hear from you about what you think about. And if I don't have to make a joke about the Beltway and the traffic, then we're having a good day. We're getting off to a good start. I'd also like to say before we get started that we've done 20 meetings now, and the energy in the room today We always have great energy in the room, but it's particularly strong, positive, and constructive in today. So I think that's also a good sign that we're going to have a great discussion. If you are a patient or patient representative, if you are someone with an organ transplant or care for, an advocate for, and you are sitting in the back, we strongly encourage you to, if there's room at a round table, to join. We can see you better if you want to join in our conversation. I'm going to give a bit of overview about our discussion today. As Meghna mentioned, we have the 2 topics for discussion. We're going to go through those in 2 different sessions. It's all in your agenda. But to boil it down, what topic 1 is talking about is what are the most significant changes in your health since you receive your transplanted organ or organs? What are the symptoms and post-transplant health effects that have the most significant impact on your life, and what worries you most about your health post-transplant? And then the second discussion, we will drill down more into treatment regimens, looking at what you're doing currently to manage your health post-transplant, both the medications that we talked about, that Mark talked about today, and other things that you may be doing, and how well those treatments are helping you manage your most significant symptoms and your health effects. What are the downsides to those treatments? And if you could craft an ideal treatment, what would it look like? What would be some of the features of that treatment? So for each of those 2 topics, we're going to have a panel of people living with an organ transplant to go through some comments and tell their story very succinctly to set the context. And I'm going to ask the topic 1 panelist to come up now, if you can, and just take a seat up here. Make your way to the front. You'll see we've have a wide range of ages, and we've identified several organs to really, we hope, give a rounded idea of what life is like. And then we're going to broaden the discussion. We're going to come out, Megan and I will come out in front, and we have microphones that will come to you so that you can build on what we hear from the panelists. We're going to ask that you state your name. First name only is fine, but state your name before answering so that we can capture it in our notes. And state also what organ or organs you have had transplanted. That's important to set the context. We will be moving around. We're not going to be focusing on kidney and then liver. It is an open discussion, and we're trying to find the common themes throughout. So, if we've heard a lot from kidney and you have a liver organ, raise your hand and we'll round out that way. Okay. You'll also have a chance to answer polling questions, and that is for those in the room today and also on the web. And I want to give a shout out to the web participants. You are very important because not everyone can make it around the Beltway in Washington, D.C. to get here. And we often find that the perspectives of those on the web is somewhat different than the perspectives shared in the room. So please participate through the comment boxes. We will have a chance, we hope, to go to the phone lines in the topic 2 discussion to get a person or 2 on the phone. So please participate as often and as much as you want to over the web. For the polling questions, both on the web and in person, it's really a discussion aid. Please don't look at this as a scientific polling or a survey result, and please don't report on it in that way. It's really to see who do we have in the room and what perspectives are you sharing? What are you thinking about? We're going to hand out clickers. I think those can be handed out now. So they'll be distributed, and it should be self-explanatory. You'll click whatever letter corresponds to the choice that you see up when the polling question comes. We're going to ask that patients or parents of patients only participate. Okay. And as Teresa mentioned, the conversation doesn't end today. We very much value your continued dialogue through the public docket, as she mentioned, which is our vehicle to engage in dialogue with our constituency. It will be open until November 27. You can share your experiences. If you didn't get a chance to fully participate as much as you wanted to today, I think most people would say that by the end of the day that there's more that they wanted to say. Please send it along. Reference, if you're in the room or participate on the webcast, that you participated, please, and that you're building on. But if you know people who were not able to join today or have not maybe didn't know about the meeting and you're in dialogue with them, encourage them to submit responses to those questions that we asked you today and share their story. It's very important to us. Anyone can comment, so if you're someone other than a patient or a patient advocate or caregiver, you can send along comments as well. We have other resources. Anyone in our Office of Strategic Programs that we introduce ourselves today, come find us. But we also have an Office of Health and Constituent Affairs. They run the Patient Representative Program. Is there anyone here from OCA, as we call them? Okay, I think they're on the website, on the web link today. But you can reach out to them if you have follow-up questions or if this excites you to participate in this way and you want to participate more broadly in other ways. We also have our Professional Affairs and Stakeholder Engagement, or PACE. And is Chris in the room today? He might also be participating on the webcast. They also facilitate communication and collaboration between the Center for Drugs and patient and healthcare stakeholders. So you can reach out to anyone. If we're sitting up here or if their name's mentioned, please reach out. A few ground rules to make sure that our discussion is as effective and respectful as possible. We really encourage patients, people living with an organ transplant, to contribute to the dialogue, and caregivers and advocates are welcome too. FDA is here to listen. My colleagues will help Megan and I with some detailed questions as you see fit. Please feel free. We may not be able to answer all the questions that you have today. Send those in the docket if you have a question, a burning question, and it hasn't been addressed today. Also, similarly, the industry representatives and the academics and researchers in the audience, they're primarily here in listening mode too, but if you have thoughts, please share those through the docket comment as well. We also have the open public comment period that Megan described earlier this morning. If there's something that's outside of the topics of health effects and treatments that you want to discuss, that open public comment. This will be a very organic discussion today. We do have some topics that we want to make sure that we get through. So Megan and I, we have to play the timekeepers, and we will move along as we have to. And so we hope that the docket, you can expand. Remember that the views expressed are personal opinions. They're very, very personal and often very sensitive. So respect for one another is paramount. I think we're preaching to a crier here, so we just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And really let us know how the meeting went today and how it's going. Find us during breaks, but also at the end, please fill out an evaluation form. It does help us. Even though we've done 20 meetings, we still learn something each and every time about how we can improve. Okay, with that, we can start some polling questions. It's both a practice and gives us a good sense of some of the characteristics of the folks in the room. So if you get your clickers, anyone need a clicker? Okay, we have a couple more clickers needed here.
Sarah?
Yes.
Our CDRH colleague has joined us. Can you invite him to introduce himself?
Yes, Arturo, would you like to introduce yourself? Oh, and turn your...
Hi, my name is Arturo Hernandez. I'm a medical reviewer for devices in organ transplantation, for organ preservation, solid organ transplant.
Thank you, Arturo. Great. Sarah? Okay. Sarah? Yes, Teresa.
I think it would help if people could keep their hand up if they don't have a clicker so Shannon can see them.
Yep.
If you need a clicker, just so she knows you need one.
Okay, in the back there. Okay. So, where do you live? You click A if you're within the Washington, D.C. metro area, or B if you're outside of the metro area. Okay. This is typical. We typically have about 2/3 of participants who are traveling, and we give a special shout out to you. You had to probably fly or drive or take a train and then get around the Beltway, so thank you. Have you received an organ transplant? So we have quite a few. We have about, I'm going to do some math, approximately 20 folks in the room who have had an organ transplant. And we are going to ask now the remainder of the polling questions that is answered by you, or if you are here representing someone who's not able to answer, is not here today, then do the polling questions. Okay, let's move on to the next one. What is you or your loved one's age, if you're on behalf of someone else? Okay. Okay. Let's see. So we will be discussing primarily the adult perspective today. We have a wide range of adult ages. I'm going to put a special shout out for pediatric perspectives. If you're on the web, can we have the web numbers, please?
We got 5% from 18 to 34, 21% 35 to 49, and 47% 50 to 64, and 26% 65 or older.
Okay, great. So again, a shout out for the pediatric perspectives. They often differ. We will get as much as we can out today, but I think this is a place where the docket comment is going to be extremely helpful. Do you identify as male? A, B, female? Okay, so we have, oh, this looks funny. It's a good thing I read the numbers and not just look at the height of the bars. I'm going to take the numbers. That we have a pretty even mix of men and women here in person and on the web.
39% male and 61% female.
Mm-hmm. We squeeze the most that we can out of the technology we have here at FDA. Okay, what type of organ transplant have you received? And if you have multiple, I think this is a check one only, so if you have multiple, just click F. Okay. So reflecting, I think, the statistics of who has organ transplants, we do have half of you in here are have a kidney organ, and multiple, I think some of the multiples have kidney as well, followed by lung. Okay, so a little bit less representation of heart and liver. We will squeeze all we can out of that today, but again, if you are on the web, can we have the web numbers?
45% kidney transplant, 20% liver, 20% lung, and 15% multiple.
Okay, so encourage all of you to participate on the web, particularly the heart and liver by the web or the docket as well, so we can get as much as we can. And pancreas also, I'm sorry. Okay. What is the length of time since you received an organ transplant? Okay. Okay. So we have several who have lived a long time with their organ, with their transplanted organ or organs. But we also have several in here in person who are really new to this. Your perspectives may be a lot different. If you are one of those people who are new to this, let us know in your comment so that we make sure we can tease out. On the web?
4% less than 1 year ago, 19% for 1 to 2, 3 to 5, and 6 to 10 years ago, and 38% for greater than 10 years ago.
Great, thank you. Okay. Have you seen more than one organ transplant or received a retransplant? So 2/3 of you here have done this multiple times. Did you receive your organ transplant from a living or deceased donor? If you don't know, press C. Okay. So most 2/3 of you here today have received an organ from a deceased donor. Have you experienced organ rejection? A, yes, B, no. Okay, about half. Okay, we'll get into some of the issues with that today. Okay. On the web,
we had 39% saying they had experienced organ rejection and 61% saying they had not.
Okay, great. Then we're about ready to move on to our discussion, and we'll go down, starting with Jim. We didn't actually meet in person. Hi, Jim. But before we get started, I'm going to ask you, when it's your turn, to and I just wanted to say that we received many, many comments from people who expressed interest in providing comments as part of the panel, and they were so informative. We encourage you to submit those to the docket as well so that we can take all we can from what the comments that you've sent in. So I want to thank the panelists for preparing the remarks, but also thank you who submitted your comments. It was very, very helpful to us in planning. With that, we'll start with Jim.
First, on behalf of myself and so many others that I represent from various transplant organizations I lead, thank you for all you do to make our lives better and safer. Yes. When people ask, how has a heart transplant changed my life, I respond, my most significant change is that I'm still alive and active. At the age of 50, given just 2 years life expectancy from a virus-induced cardiomyopathy back in 1992, the heart transplant in 94 has allowed me to live a fulfilled and active life for 22 years now, living to see 7 grandchildren born. The earliest 2 are now in college. With no prior health issues, not even taking aspirin, my heart was attacked by an unknown virus, idiopathic cardiomyopathy, requiring hospitalization and a heart transplant. I now take 30+ pills a day, both prescription and over-the-counter, very expensive brand name and generic drugs that prevent rejection and keep me otherwise healthy. I've dealt with typical post-transplant issues, including various cancers, prostate cancer in 2000, many skin cancers, kidney cancer in 2012, and living with type 2 diabetes for the past 10 years now, a common side effect of the specific drugs that I take today. I live a fully functional life in retirement today, having returned to full-time employment just 3 months post-transplant for 12 years until reaching normal retirement these past 10 years now. Most of my life challenges can be attributed to the immunosuppressant drugs and advancing age, as I am now 73 years old. Specifically, the cancers, especially the many skin cancers, are well known to be high risk for patients with organ transplant, both with growing years after transplant and with normal aging. The meds taken in the early post-transplant years were toxic to the kidneys, and when the kidneys began showing damage due to those meds, new drugs had come on the market that were a substitute for the cyclosporin with tacrolimus as a less toxic med, but still with its own side effects, that diabetes I came down with in 2006. The only worry I live with is the concern for those cancer risks and personal finances of age, given the heavy cost of the meds, even with Medicare and gap insurance support. Each day is a gifted extension to the life was threatened those many years ago, now living with a strong heart, gifted by a 38-year-old stranger in their dying. What's changed over time? With a heart transplant, you begin with heavy doses of those meds and weekly heart cath biopsies. Both taper down over time, with the invasive heart cath less frequent, finally stopping at the 5-year point, and the meds at a long-term standard dose much lower than those first 6 months. My current regimen seems to be working perfectly. With semi-annual clinic visits and testing, we catch issues early and treat them with minimal pain or damage. Overall, I've experienced ideal treatment with a great transplant team and the other doctors for all those 22 years, which I will happily celebrate this October 19th again. Thanks again for a unique opportunity to share this amazing, heart-filled life adventure with you.
Thank you, Jim. And now I'll have Jeff.
So I too would like to thank you for this unique opportunity to share my perspective on a double lung transplant, 13 years, July of 2003. So we did see some slides. Some of you may not be aware, but a lung transplant has some of the worst long-term outcomes of all solid organ transplants. And none of the medications I take were designed for lung transplant. So I often say that lung transplant, and it means all transplant as well, is just exchanging one set of problems for others. I'm very fortunate to have effectively avoided major rejection issues. My lungs have been mostly stable. My pre-transplant disease and my need to take immunosuppressants has put me at risk for skin cancers, which I deal with daily, and as you can see, has affected my Hollywood good looks. All transplant recipients are at risk for kidney failure as a result of long-term anti-rejection meds. And in addition, it has been suggested that my loss of hearing is a result of my prescribed antibiotics. Managing drug side effects, fear, anxiety, and feeling different every day is a real challenge, along with fatigue. It is the most frequent issue I manage as I tire easily, while sleep is restless and mostly incomplete. Other than regular changes of anti-rejection meds and the addition of skin cancer reduction medications, my therapies have remained mostly constant. But these issues do impact my daily life. I often struggle with staying focused, and managing my time and energy levels can vary widely. There are bad days and good days, but still it beats the alternative. I'm very fortunate, as on the best days, my symptoms are manageable and tolerable, and I try not to let them dictate my lifestyle. When they are at their worst, I listen to my body and respond accordingly. I have, on occasions where I was unable to do something I planned or hoped to, I accommodate the inconvenience. My motto has been, get busy living. So what has changed? I avoid the sun as much as possible and no longer fish the waters of Florida Keys, trying to reduce my skin cancers. I worry daily about bronchial obliterans disease, cancer rejection, and leaving my wife widowed, in that order. I would like to take this opportunity to encourage the FDA and pharmaceutical companies to consider developing treatments that make the lives of all post-lung transplant recipients better, safer, and thus more rewarding. And I'd like to, I'm known for leaving everybody with a quote, and I hope you'll find this one interesting. Our scars are a reminder that the past was real. Hannibal Lecter.
Thanks, Jeff. He warned me there would be a chuckle or two. Then we'll go with Layla.
Right, now I have to follow that. I don't have any jokes. I'm a newbie. My name is Layla, like the Eric Clapton song, if anyone has heard of it. And I'm truly blessed for this amazing opportunity to be here and share my experience. I'm only 9 months out from a kidney transplant. And this is a completely new life for me. The last time I was healthy, I was 19. I am now 28 as of last week. It was my birthday. First birthday with my kidney filled. I was diagnosed with FSGS, which is scarring of the kidneys that progressed to renal failure, and I spent 5 years on dialysis and the deceased donor list. However, I acknowledge I will always be a renal patient, which still means paying extra close attention to my health. And many believe that you get a transplant, it's a cakewalk, and you're healed forever. Surprise, it's not. Post-transplant wasn't a day at the beach for me. Sure, I'm very grateful but you have to fight for your organ the same way that you fought to receive it. A couple of days after my transplant surgery, I experienced a drop in my hemoglobin and platelet levels. Initially, we thought my disease FSGS was recurring and attacking my kidney. However, after plasmapheresis, which is exchanging of donor plasma to wash out antibodies, 2 blood transfusions, and multiple biopsies, we found that it wasn't reoccurrence, but just not the right combination of immunosuppressants for me. So once I was switched from Prograf to cyclosporin, coupled with prednisone and Cellcept, everything turned around immediately. I simultaneously experienced a serious bout of pneumonia from lack of movement and deep breathing due to pain. So use those spirometers, they actually work. From there, the next few months will be trial and error with water intake, even being readmitted due to severe dehydration. But I tested the limits and I learned from it. Luckily, I only needed a couple of days of IV fluids and I was back on the right track. I worry about losing my kidney due to dehydration because on dialysis, we were so fluid restricted, and now it's hard to mentally adjust back to drinking more water. I also started back exercising, and that's still in the trial and error phase. I think that's going to be a lifelong trial and error phase for me. But I was trying to reignite my old 19-year-old healthy athletic self. But I found myself spiking my creatinine levels. Now I listen to my body and I start with walking, biking, and yoga for short periods of time. I'm also finding that if you had anxiety and depression prior to transplant, guess what? You still have it. But I've been with a therapist for over 4 years and continue to do the work on myself while adjusting to life post-transplant. And it definitely takes some adjusting to, but I'm honoring the process. Now, for example, seeing the stubborn acne on my face caused by steroids and hormones brings me some anxiety about just how immunocompromised I was told that I would be. However, I haven't been sick or had any infections, but we'll see after the plane ride home. So when I put it into perspective, I think I could live with the acne. Maybe I'm not as immunocompromised as I thought. Once everyone got sick at work, I washed my hands frequently, carried Lysol, and they thought I was rude because I said, stay away from me. But it's necessary. You have to take care of yourself. Also, I found by living a more stress-free and meditative life helps reduce both anxiety and depression. I send my kidney and myself unconditional love, gratitude, and self-compassion to try out different things until we find a balance. My kidney, Phil, obviously is a trooper to put up with me, but he knows I love him and we will continue to thrive. I encourage you all to give yourself a little bit of love, self-compassion, and honor your process, whatever it may be. Thank you.
Thank you, Leila. And now Michael?
Good morning. My name is Michael Garrett, and I'm in my 62nd year. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 5, and my first transplant occurred in 1990 when I was 35, and that was a very early, at least in the transplant game, kidney pancreas done here locally. I also had a living-related kidney transplant also in 1990 because you can't keep a good immune system down. And I had a second pancreas-only transplant in 1990. My biggest or my best answer to question number one is that I'm still here. I had I checked once with insurance at tables in 1960, and a male diagnosed at age of 5 with type 1 diabetes in 1960 had a life expectancy of approximately 31 years. I've now doubled that, so I guess something is working. The second question about post-transplant effect and symptoms, I can say my wallet is a little lighter, but at least I have a wallet. Physically, there are effects from transplant and most assuredly the drug therapies. I have muscle aches, outbreaks of cancer, skin and otherwise, and less resistance to viruses and infections. I sometimes wonder, though, if some of these are due to my advanced age. Question 3 about what I don't do now because of transplant therapies. The answer is not much. But I'm not as active as I once was physically, but again, how much is transplant related and how much is age related? I'm losing my vision, as you can probably tell from this, but this seems to be the fault of long-term type 1 and not the fault of the therapies. On good days, I plow through, and on bad days, I take a break. My experience with transplant organs has changed over time. I have received 4 organs in transplants and have rejected or lost 3 of them. The first 2 were due to acute rejection, and the third, well, I was told 10 years on a pancreas was about all I could expect. So I'm definitely looking for therapies to protect transplant organs for a lifetime. And of course, as a side note, I realize that the scientific community has pretty much decided that type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. And so I never thought that getting a pancreas transplant was a cure for type 1 diabetes. It's merely another form of therapy. And logically speaking, at least in my small brain, if it's going to attack a natural pancreas, it's going to attack the transplanted ones also. So probably what's going to be happening from my own point of view is that pancreas transplants are doomed to failure until we figure out how to cure type 1 diabetes. As far as most worrisome, probably organ failure first, followed by cancer and major infections or illnesses. But I've stayed relatively healthy over the past 26 plus years, despite being so sick. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And now we'll have Lindsay.
Hello, my name is Lindsay and I'm 14 years old. I received my kidney transplant from my dad in 2012 when I was 10. I'm so grateful to him and everyone directly involved in my care, including the doctors, nurses, and child life. But very importantly, I'm also thankful for the people who helped me who didn't even know me. Specifically, I mean the researchers and other transplant patients whose efforts in the years before my journey helped me to get where I am today. To understand my gratitude, I will tell you a little bit about my 8-year battle with idiopathic FSGS. Over the course of 8 years, starting when I was 2.5, I endured 172 hospitalizations, 22 surgeries, hemodialysis, peritoneal dialysis, countless medications, including steroids, that compressed my backbones and left me in a wheelchair, and 1 black box drug administered 13 times over a 1.5 years. I missed my entire 1st and 3rd grade years. I was sick, sad, and lost my childhood. How has life been since my transplant? Awesome. It's been a huge difference. I grew 5 inches in the 1st year after my transplant. I'm only taking 7 pills twice a day instead of 21 pills twice a day. I've had no reoccurrence of FSGS. I have more energy. I don't have any pain. I can eat normally. No more gross meal diet. I can go to school. I can have sleepovers and spend time with my friends, and I have a life. It's not perfect, though. I have some unique challenges for me as opposed to other students at my school. I have some orthostatic blood pressure issues, not due to renal insufficiency, and daily morning fatigue. I tend to feel nauseous every morning and need to stand up slowly. I can't exercise as much as I'd like to. I don't have much stamina in gym class. I lost all of my childhood vaccine titers during the course of my disease. This is going to be tough because I'm not supposed to get sick, but of course I will always be immune suppressed. I have to drink 85 ounces of fluids daily, and this can be hard when you're running from class to class all day. I used to overload my body with fluids when I got home from school, just to get my required amount in before the end of the day. It was not good for my body and worsened my morning nausea problem. It's becoming a little easier to drink now that I'm in high school. Personally, I do not have any adherence issues, but I do understand where other teenage transplant patients might. It is hard to remember to take your meds every 12 12 hours exactly. It's hard to drink as much as we have to, and it's hard to keep away from infectious people. I know I'm going to need at least one more transplant in my lifetime. I know that I'm going to be on these potentially toxic anti-rejection meds for the rest of my life, and I understand that I will always have to be so careful not to get sick. Here are some items on my post-transplant wish list. How about a transplanted kidney that will last the rest of my life? Fewer toxic medications, and it would be great if meds could be taken just once a day. Rituximab and all my other meds carry the huge risk of cancers over my lifetime. That's pretty scary. Monthly blood work to check my tacrolimus levels is annoying, and it's worse if I get sick. Then I end up getting labs every 2 days until I get better. Will constant sticks in my vein cause me access issues later in life? Will it be hard for me to find another kidney someday due to increased antigen sensitivity? What if I want to become a mom someday? Can we make it so that pregnancies will not increase my PRA? I wish I wasn't so susceptible to sicknesses due to my immune suppression. I would love to have to drink less. It would free up some time. I know I'm not the only one wishing that. Will I be able to get health insurance on my own someday? What will happen to me when I start showing signs of ESRD again and need a new kidney? Will I lose my job? Those are my thoughts and concerns. Thank you for listening.
Thank you all very much to all of the panelists who provided what we hope is a reflective set of comments, sharing your perspectives and experiences. We always start by asking, did you hear yourself, your thoughts, your experiences in at least one of those panelists up there? Okay. That's what we hope, and that's what you guys have provided, so thank you very much. Is there anyone with a liver? We didn't have liver on the panel, I don't believe. Anyone with a liver who wants to briefly share your experience, especially if it's a little different?
I don't know how different it is. I have primary biliary cirrhosis and required a liver transplant. It came on rather suddenly. I thought I had the flu. And then I started bleeding internally. So that's the onset. Prior to that, general childhood and adolescence and young adulthood, I had no diseases. My basic concerns have been reflected. I had a heart attack, and it was otherwise unprecedented. And I now have diabetes, and this, I believe, is from the drugs. One of the things that you had asked about was an ideal or a preferable treatment, and I don't know where the research is on this, but what I would hope for is a mechanism or a method for pre-transplant suppression, such that when this transplant occurs, it is not a foreign body to the human, and that subsequent to that, it may be for a short time, but would not need lifetime drug therapy.
Thank you very much, Jean. Is there anything on the web? Is anyone putting comments in yet?
There are a few questions related to treatment, but not much on symptoms yet.
Okay, so I'll take this as a reminder to those of you on the web. I don't know if you can see us or the people in the audience, but please contribute your thoughts during the course of this meeting, and we will summarize them periodically. So, what we noticed in our team as we were going through the panel comments that came in, as we were talking to the panelists, is the overall gratitude, and it has been heartwarming. The gratitude for you to be here today and be able to be here today. It is very helpful to have this big picture, and I think you've said it strongly. So as we continue and as we go through the day, we encourage you to voice the significant impacts or downsides. Don't be afraid to tell us what the downsides are. We know of your gratitude for having the transplanted organ. In the spirit of continual improvement, we're going to be focusing primarily on challenges that you face and what you would like to see in making drugs better. So I think we've never heard such gratitude in our meetings before, and so it really is heartwarming. So now I will get off my emotional state. It does. It's emotional. You have made it such. So let's do a poll question, then that will bring us back. So, this is a hard one. What comorbid conditions, and you can check all that apply, have you experienced post-transplant, if any? I'm not going to read through the list. I'll let you read through it. If you have not had any comorbid conditions that you're aware of, then you would click I. Yeah. You can do all of them, if they all. It would include all cancers. Things that you acquired post-transplant. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the infections of A and F are, we heard about those. So you're concerned about infections and you've experienced infections. We might dig into that a little bit. Followed by D, the depression or anxiety, as we heard Layla say before. I will let the panel, if there's any that you would like to follow up on, in particular, if something surprises you. And while you're thinking about that, let's talk about infections just for a few minutes. We're going to be bouncing to many, many different topics, so I'll only spend a few minutes on this. We heard about the risk of infection and worrying about it. Let's talk about your experience with infection. Anything that surprised you about an experience with infection post-transplant. We'll go here to Dan, and then back there. And again, state your name and your organ, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dan Bonner. I'm a liver transplant patient, and I think what has surprised me with infections, particularly EBV, is how over time my EBV levels would start off very low, around 200, and then work their way up to over 2,000. But then with no sort of medical intervention at all, my numbers seem to come back down to below 200. And I find that to be odd because during that time, my immunosuppressant levels weren't changed at all in any way. But at one point, at the same time, having kidney enzymes that are creatinine level of 2.8 around there is the same time EBV was going up, and then magically my numbers came back down. Okay. So that to me was a little bit surprising considering the lack of medical intervention.
Okay. And then back there?
Good morning. My name is Jack Lennon. I had a 3-time kidney transplant recipient. So most probably surprising, and I'm sure most of the others in the room have experienced this, it's not just that we are more susceptible to the viral infections that the doctors will check on a regular basis, but it's also the seasonal flus and the infections that you would catch at school or at work. And the worst part about those is that you're more likely to catch them because of your, decreased immune system, but also the fact that you can't kick it, right? I want a super antibiotic because, my brother will get better in 2 days. I'm out for a week, right? Or sometimes even worse, it really lays you on your back and you have to be admitted for something, somebody else is just going to be able to, normally function throughout the day with. And so, it's that concern about really the impact of the infection and what it can have on your daily life.
Great. We saw a lot of heads nodding, a point that resonates. Okay. Anything else on infection? Okay, one more.
Yeah, my name is Kevin Fowler, 12-year kidney transplant recipient. I think the whole aspect about infections is the question is that what's really happening in terms of my concern is the cancer risk. And then I think it underscores the need to have tailored therapy, the need for diagnostics, yada, 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 yada. But that's the larger issue, right? Am I on too much medication or am I on the right enough? Besides the inconvenience that it results in too. And then the other thing too is that to point out is that there's a lot of people that are losing their organs due to those hospitalizations because of the fact of the cumulative effect of all the antibiotic use and the fact that sometimes patients don't take it serious.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Okay, we heard about diabetes from a couple of you on the panel. Is there any perspective on the onset of diabetes that has surprised you? Anyone else want to? Okay, we'll come here to Jean.
Just one quick thing. My endocrinologist is of the belief that there's a difference between normal weight diabetes and metabolic syndrome. I'm not obese currently, nor have I ever been, nor do I have a profile of really high sugar intake. I mean, I like sweets too, but so his belief and he says the status of the research now is they're looking at normal weight diabetes as being something different, and I don't know what the status of that is or how well accepted that is, but it would be interesting to find out.
Thank you, Jean. Our colleagues have indicated that they would like to hear a little bit more about depression or anxiety. We heard Layla. Oh, okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say something about the diabetes issue. So I don't know if this is the case for all solid organ transplants, but in the lung transplant world, it's not unusual to get diabetes post-transplant. Mm-hmm. And for some of us, it goes away once our medications are stabilized.
Okay. Thank you for making the point. Okay, so now thinking about depression and anxiety, as Layla pointed out, if you had it before, it doesn't go away. Any other thoughts on your experience with depression or anxiety that you'd like to share? Okay, go ahead, Kevin. And on the web, please, too, write in your comments.
I think this kind of goes back to that this is a huge issue, right? And I think that kudos to the agenda this afternoon. They're going to deal about that with adherence or non-adherence, which is a byproduct. But I go back to my first year and a half transplant. I had it easy in comparison to many people. But that whole psychological adjustment, most physicians don't understand it. In that first year and a half, I struggled tremendously. So I think it's a large issue because of a lot of different reasons. But if you're looking to improve it for patients, is now how do you improve the patient journey by really understanding the emotional side for the patient? Mm-hmm. Okay. That is a huge issue.
Okay, so that's raised another thought here, and then we'll go.
Hi, my name is Nicole Jefferson, kidney transplant 2008. One thing I wanted to discuss with the depression issue is, although I had my transplant in 2008, right now it's in the process of failing, so I'm going through trying to get listed again. And that's one of the things that's come up is the depression, the anxiety, the feelings of disappointing my donor, although deceased, the process of her dying again, now that I'm losing this one. And although I see a therapist, that's something that I didn't think about in the beginning. I didn't think I would. I was told it would last 4 to 6 years. However, I never understood that the time would come and how I would feel, and that it would put me in a anxiety mode or depression mode.
Sorry, we have something on the web, and then we'll come here.
We've heard a few symptoms on the webcast, including tremors, GI issues, including diarrhea, broken or restless sleep. One person specifically was talking about how her chronic sinus issues have been surprisingly limiting to her because she's restricted from taking medications that might help with them, so they linger much longer than normal, and a few other experiences like that.
Thank you. And we'll come here.
So my name's Heather. I have a lung transplant, and
and I had one 10 years ago, now 11, and it lasted 1 year. And then my native lung came back somehow, even though I had IPF. And now I have a new one last October, and it's fantastic. But one thing that my husband and I discuss a lot, especially in this first year, is the feeling that we truly have PTSD. And I think, I don't say that lightly, but it's, you have a sneeze and you freak out. And I mean, and what that causes is your body reacts. And we have a lot going on. We have to heal. We have to calm down. Your body has to have time. And our doctors don't. There's always a social worker involved, but really, they're not giving you the things you need. And most of us don't want to take another medication. I fortunately meditated. I learned to do that. I calm myself down that way. It's helped with pain, all kinds of things. But it just, even with all of that, and for a little bit I was on Celexa, but it was decided it was going to cause some more issues with my medication, and if I could be away from it, try and be away from it. So, but I think this is just such a common thing that even our caregivers go through, and it's quality of life, and that's what we're trying to do our best with. So if that could be somehow part of the protocol, whether it's medicated, but with figuring out those medications that won't hurt us as much as they will help us.
Yeah. Thank you to you, Heather. And what was your name in blue? Nicole. Nicole made really great points. I think that we will probably hear again about the trauma of when the challenges sets in and when the worry sets in. So thank you for that. There's one more polling question that we will have here about the comorbidity for our understanding. If you could get your clickers out. Which statement best categorizes the source of your comorbidity as best you can? We know that this is sometimes hard to know or to differentiate, but one of these that best categorizes it. You didn't know there'd be a quiz when you came today. Yeah. Oh, okay. Can you? What other the other health effects that you've had that you have experienced post-transplant that you could reasonably think could be because of your transplant? How did you, to the best of your knowledge, how did you acquire that? Was it do you know if it was transmitted from the donor of the organ? Did you get it when you got the organ? Was it prior to your organ transplantation? That would be B. C. Was it acquired, in the community because of immunosuppression or infection, or was it acquired, as you could best guess, as an adverse effect of a treatment that you were on? Yes. Listed up there as Barrett's syndrome. Okay. So Barrett's syndrome from.
I don't know if this applies to anyone else, but I've developed Barrett's syndrome from possibly from the repeated endoscopies that have been required. I don't know if that's unique or if that's, but it's not a category. It's a post-transplant surgical intervention that wasn't listed.
Thank you. Okay, let's see what the responses are. But I think what we'll take away from this, maybe even more than the responses, is the difficulty in answering this type of question and understanding how all the pieces fit together and where you might have acquired it. It's easy for us to come up with the question, and we don't always appreciate how hard it might be to answer the question. But with that said, we have someone. in the back.
Hi, I'm Ellen Cohen. Well, Ellen Griffith for purposes of my transplant. My kidney's name is Ben.
Hi, Ben.
But anyway, for my brother who was my donor. The issue of comorbidities, I don't know how much research has been done on differences in hospital post-transplant protocols. When I had my transplant, I have a long history, genetic history going back generations of depression. And I was terrified of, I knew that some medications, post-transplant medications, made depression worse. My transplant center, they generally, as a practice, do not give you prednisone after you leave the hospital. Other transplant centers that I know of from being on web groups routinely put people on long-term prednisone. So that it seems to me that this issue of comorbidities, somewhere there's a side issue of what are the hospital protocols and how do they compare, how do they affect the comorbidities? I had my transplant in January, kidney transplant in January, in the middle of that incredible flu season where several types of flus were going around. I never caught anything. And most recently, I did catch a cold that has disabled people for weeks, and I'm over it. Mm-hmm. I caught it last week. It's gone. Mm-hmm. Why are immune systems different? Why am I somehow almost as healthy and almost as immune as I was before my transplant? Mm-hmm.
I can see the envy in Jack's eyes as you hear about how healthy. Thank you for raising those questions. And now we're going to move on to, oh yes, go ahead, Layla.
I have something to add. Mm-hmm. And my situation is quite unique because when you think of something being transmitted from a donor, we typically think of infections or viruses. And my donor actually committed suicide while in jail. And so he was a high-risk donor. And throughout multiple testing, I didn't get any infections from him, no HIV, no viruses. However, since I did already struggle with depression post-transplant, I felt the depths of his depression. And it's interesting because I've talked to other transplant recipients, and they will say, like, if they got an organ from a woman who's in menopause, they'll feel the sweating. Mm-hmm. You know, they'll take on some of those symptoms. I mean, why wouldn't you, if that organ has been with this person all of their life, through all of their experiences? And I knew my depression was under control. And it was days I would just lay in the hospital in the dark. I would have horrible thoughts. I would sink to such a low that I've never experienced before. I knew it wasn't mine. And I'm, of course, with the help of an amazing therapist, she helped me to just decipher, you know, you have to just send him love and let him know that this is going to be different this time. You know, I always let my kidney know that he'll never experience those depths of depression that he did to take his own life. And I think that's something we don't typically look at because it's not tangible. It's not something you can measure, but it was very real for me.
It's a profound point about the reality that you have another being that you have acquired, that you are sharing with. So thank you very much. So we'll move on to another polling question.
Yes. So I think the topic one panelist really set up how life after transplant changes. As Layla said, it's not just, it's perfect. You have to find that balance. And so there's a lot of lifestyle changes. So if we can start with this polling questions, which aspects of your personal care have changed most significantly? Hair care, dental care, D is eye care, E is dietary needs, and F is other areas not mentioned. Yes, you may check all that apply. Okay, so 72% skincare, which goes back to the skin cancer risk that everyone's kind of been mentioning this morning. We have 68% with dietary needs, and then a variety for all the other. Let's talk about, so we've talked about the risk of cancer, but we haven't really talked about some ways that you guys have changed your lifestyle to manage some of those risks. Does anyone want to kind of tell us how they avoid the sun and so forth?
Avoid the sun.
So I thought someone was speaking for me there a second. I think just the thing about the skin is, I mean, basically it's trying to cover my body as much as possible. But I think the issue is a lot of times it was kind of underreported as an issue at the time of transplant, as well as overall a lot of these other issues that are being listed here. Many of these issues were really not counseled upon 12 years ago. So.
Okay. Anyone else? I think Nicole.
Hi, I think one of my biggest issues is dental care.
Okay.
I didn't realize with the transplant and the medications that I would be on that my dental care would have to be so intensive. The bone loss and the gum pain. Also, in addition, and I guess this goes into it with the bone loss in my teeth. Also with my legs, I had severe bone problems, and I actually broke a hip pretty early onto it, and that would be my biggest thing.
Okay. What about dietary needs? I don't think we've really heard much about that.
The dietary
changes due to constipation, diarrhea, weight gain, or weight loss?
Well, mine just simply relates to the diabetes. It's, it's a struggle to keep that A1C in line, and when I don't, it's very depressing because my appetite really hasn't changed. So that's been significant for me.
I'm Mary Pierce. I am a double lung transplant, 23 years out, which makes me a bit of an outlier. The dietary needs, with all the drugs that we're taking, particularly the antibiotics, I think we all deal with diarrhea, irritable bowel, those kinds of issues, and it takes a good balancing act to make sure that we do everything we can to maintain that. Weight gain is a huge issue for most of us. We've got to watch everything we do, everything we take in, and the additional challenge for all of us, I think, is watching what we eat, the cleanliness of what we're eating. Make sure we wash things, stay off a salad bar, don't eat anything that's prepared for us that we're not sure of its origins. And then in my situation, I've had eye problems and problem with veins and cataracts, and I would imagine that many of us have, well, you can see the cataract issue is very visible. And then hearing loss. I'd be curious to ask that specific question. How many of us have had hearing loss due to the side effects of the drugs?
At any point you can feel comfortable to raise your hand, so thank you for the question. Hearing loss?
Here I am. I am a 10-year heart transplant patient. And yes, the dietary needs, I mean, I can check off everything, but the dietary needs are particularly challenging at the moment. In fact, it nearly got in the way of my joining you because I cannot heal from diverticulitis since April, and it's painful and dreadful, the constipation or the diarrhea. You never know what you're going to have one day to the next, but it is chronic, and it gets in the way of a normal schedule and nearly interfered with my being able to come. My doctors only gave me permission on Friday.
I think Michael had one comment.
Well, when I got into this game as a type 1 diabetic, so I was used to watching my diet, but most everybody that I was friends with back in the early days, the prednisone therapy was quite prevalent, and everybody would blame their overweight on taking all that prednisone. Of course, I did have one doctor that told me that my problem was an overactive fork.
On the lighter side, I'm still Ellen Griffith Cohen, and I'm still a kidney transplant recipient. My biggest fear for infections is that I am a lifelong, not only nail biter, but biting the cuticles and the skin around my nails, all of which is, I thought, a very good source for infection. And so one of my post-transplant changes has been going for a manicure every 2 weeks. I recommend it.
I think Pujita has one more.
Jane, I am a kidney transplant, 21 years, and my biggest challenge is the dietary needs, but not of those conditions up there. It's the sodium intake. I struggle every day to figure out what to eat when I'm not at my house. The sodium intake at a restaurant, I can't tell. If I want to order a grilled chicken and then go look it up online, it has so much sodium in it, and I am very, very sensitive to that, especially with the medications that I'm on. So for me, the dietary needs, and I would love to see the restaurants, instead of putting the fat, the calories, put the sodium intake in there, put the other stuff in there, that people who have transplants can choose healthier options so that we know how to eat better.
Thank you, Mary Jane. Graham, anything from the web?
So we've been getting a lot of stuff on the web. Thank you very much for participating. A few symptoms that people have been mentioning. Several people mentioned blurred vision. Again, we heard about tremors and restless sleep, joint and bone pain, damage to the lower GI and GI issues, various skin cancer issues, losing hair. A few people mentioned hearing loss, hypoparathyroidism, and in terms of depression or anxiety, a few people mentioned that they had disease reoccurrence, which may prevent them from getting another transplant, which is a scary thought for them, and also people worried about having to live the rest of their life on dialysis.
There's a lot as far as lifestyle changes and management, so please feel free to expand upon all of what you've heard here and anything that we may not have gotten to in our public docket. We read through all of the comments, and they're all part of the public record.
And Megan, so I'm looking at the clock, and we're going to dip into the break for 5 minutes, so we'll shift it all back. So,
okay,
go ahead.
Great. More time to talk.
I'm the one who got to make those calls, and I'm going to make that call.
So I kind of want to ask everyone in the room right now, what has surprised you the most about your health post-transplant, as far as like impacts on daily life? The most surprising.
It was being alive afterwards, so that's all I have to say. I'm Jean Peretta. I'm 12 years out from a single lung transplant.
Jack?
I think, so Jack Lennon again, 3-time kidney transplant recipient. I think the thing that surprised me the most is that even though you're stable, how much the consideration of having a transplant comes into daily decision making. For example, you get hired on at a company and they offer you additional supplemental life or supplemental disability, right? I'm 28 years old, normal 28-year-old male. I don't need that, you know? But me thinking, you know what? I've been on dialysis. I know what that's like. I should probably get that. You know, same thing with just, you know, any type of going to, you know, I haven't been feeling very well recently. Should I go in and get my labs checked? It's just this sort of simmering worry, and then every once in a while you're like, oh, I do have to make the consideration for this, either for today or planning long term.
Let me narrow the question a little bit. So what negative health effect post-transplant has surprised you the most? Anyone? I think we have.
Hello, my name is Austin Lee, and I've had 2 kidney transplants. I had one that lasted 14 years, and one now that's doing great. It's been 6 years since I had it, and they're both from living donors. And negative is that it's kind of funny because I'm a 2-year-old teacher. I work with toddlers, so getting sick, like, you know, colds and flus, but actually in my first year of working in childcare, I really got sick a lot. I worked around infants, but as time went on, I guess like my immune system got better because I really haven't had much, issues with flus or colds. But that's pretty much, and it probably speaks for a lot of people who've had organ transplants. Is just, just getting sick in your immune system. But that's pretty much it for me.
We're going to let Marty
Hello, my name is Marty Marin. I'm a liver transplant 6.5 years ago. I think the thing that surprised me the most is I do have a lot of trouble with my eyesight nowadays and hearing. The good news is, however, I started off with about 20 hairs on the top of my head. And look at this gorgeous head of hair now.
Thank you very much, Marty.
I do kind of want to see, I know we have a couple of folks in the room who may have received their transplant as a pediatric patient. I know we have Lindsay, who is currently a pediatric patient, but was anything strikingly different as far as health impacts post-transplant? Do we have anyone?
And if you're on the web, please contribute
on the web
to
as
this.
well.
If you're a caretaker or a teenager.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Schwartz. I have a 5-year-old son who received a kidney transplant when he was 2.5. So he's about 3 years post-transplant. And it's been an incredible change in his life and our life. He was born in renal failure. So he spent 2.5 years on peritoneal dialysis at home every night for 12 hours. So his kidney transplant has dramatically changed his life. It's given him life, and it's given, as parents, it's given us our lives back. There's only a very few negative things. He's in kindergarten. He's there today, spending the whole day at school, drinking his water. He still has a feeding tube to give him his medications. We're trying to wean him, but it's difficult as a pediatric patient because I'd like to get him on pills, but to get him on pills, he needs to be at specific doses, and we can't make the changes, the little minuscule 0.1 ml changes to his doses on pills. So we're kind of stuck in this no man's land of wanting to push him off his feeding tube to give him even more of a normal childhood, not at the nurse's office multiple times every single day, changing dressings and those kind of things. But we just aren't able to get to that place. And he's not able to drink the 2 liters of water, as a 5-year-old. He's doing great, but he's not there yet. So it'd be great if we could make some changes to the compounded medications or pills in different dosage and different dosages.
Okay, great.
We have one more comment over here.
Hi, my name is Michael Middleman. I'm 3-time transplant recipient, 2 from cadaver, 1 from living. My first transplant was when I was 6. So the things that I see as very different is, one, when I was a pediatric patient, that was from a cadaver. The care in the hospital and post was very different. I'm treated, I don't think, as well as an adult patient as I was when I was a child. That's very true. But I also think that afterwards, sort of the way my body has rebounded has been very different. And then also, I think a third thing has been sort of the care protocols. After my first 2 transplants, there was a lot of restriction around, wearing the mask and doing all these things afterwards. And the third one was in 2001, and there was like no restrictions. So no pre-meds before going to the dentist, no wearing a mask and going to matinee movies, and none of that stuff. So the restrictions have gone way down, but maybe that's also a lax in care.
Great, thank you, Michael. Let's tease apart some of these daily impacts a little bit more. I think we have another polling question. What are the most bothersome impacts of your organ transplantation on your daily life? Please choose up to 3 impacts. A, ability to participate in or perform activities. B, ability to fall asleep at night. C, ability to sleep through the night. D, ability to concentrate or stay focused. E, ability to care for self, family, and others. F, impacts on sexual intimacy. G, emotional impacts. And H, other impacts not mentioned. Okay, so half of you, D, ability to concentrate or stay focused, cognitive, okay. Nearly 50%, ability to sleep through the night. And then a little of everything else as well. Other impacts not mentioned, first off. Would someone mind sharing with us what those impacts might be? Anyone? 22%? No? Okay. Ability to concentrate or stay focused. Can someone expand on that? Is that at work, the time of the day? Is there something that triggers that possibly?
First, I want to go back to other impacts.
Okay.
I think one of the impacts that's not listed up there is the social aspect of things. The kidney failure, the transplant, invisible disease. So people see me and they don't see a person who doesn't feel well, a person who has issues and can't walk that far. So people will say, well, come on, especially at work. When I change departments, they may not know my situation, so they don't understand why I can't walk to the other end of the building because my legs give out or I'm tired or I don't feel good. So I think social impacts would be a big one. Also, if I park in the handicap, people look at me funny because I get out and they don't understand why I am walking what looks to be okay, but I'm really not okay. But the ability to perform activities such as work, work is an issue. Sometimes I'll wake up and there'll be issues from the night before where I couldn't fall asleep, or just the medicine may make me feel sick depending on when I take my prednisone or different things like that. So that's an issue that I have with both of those.
Great, thank you, Nicole. I think Lindsay was going to add something.
Staying concentrated isn't a problem for me because when I take tests and unit tests, I tend to rush, but then I try to slow myself down by looking at stuff in the room, but then I can't regain that focus. I don't know, I kind of go off into another world. And my tremors, they kind of affect my handwriting, and that affects it as well.
Thank you, Lindsay.
We'll have time for a few more. We knew we wouldn't be able to get into all of these, but this gives us a sense, and we'll probably be revisiting some of these themes in the topic too, and in the afternoon.
Can I just add to the other question on H? Something that didn't get mentioned, I'm sort of surprised at, is the bothersome regimen of taking pills on a timely basis every single day, and the coordination of those pills, some which have impact on each other. That certainly bothers me.
We will get into that in the topic 2 discussion in some depth.
Yes.
I'm keeping it. I think we're going to need to
Sarah's
go to a break,
bad
so we'll
cop
take
today.
a couple more. Yep.
Hi, this is Michael again. I was just talking, sorry. One thing that's been particularly bothersome for me, which may seem like a small thing, is being on the job market. I have a lot of things in my background and sort of resume related to kidney world and transplant world, and I get questioned about it a lot, and I'm pretty sure I've been discriminated against because of that, and employers that look at you and say, is this person going to be out again for, be out for 6 months? So it's always a struggle to kind of, how do you answer that? And how do you talk about that? I have no good answer for it except that it's happened and it's hard to deal with.
Thank you, Michael. I was going to say, please expand in the docket comments. Like I said, we read all of them. The link is on the agenda as well as on the slides, and we'll email it to you guys as well. We'd love to hear a little bit more detail and more insight on all of these issues. We originally had a 15-minute break.
Should we make it?
I think topic 2 is just going to be building on this, so we will take a 15-minute break, and please come back at 11:10, and we'll get started promptly. Topic 2, panelists, if you could just make your way up to the front when you come back.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.